Atlantis has attacked the surface world, provoked by an accidental missile launch by a United States superdestroyer. Two of DC's biggest cities, Metropolis and Gotham City, have been flooded, as has Boston, Massachusetts. The Justice League, notably Cyborg, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman, have been doing what they can to limit casualties and stop the attack. To that end, Aquaman tried to talk to his brother, Orm, the King of Atlantis, but with no bargaining power and no real authority backing his words, his efforts were wasted. The Justice League demanded Orm surrender, and fighting broke out. A fight that the Justice League lost. Captured by Orm, everyone save Cyborg has been sentenced to the Dark Waters. Orm now prepares his forces to sink the city of Boston. This has forced Cyborg's hand. In order to rescue the Justice League, he's going to have his remaining lung removed. Replaced, really, with a unit that will allow him to operate underwater. While he is under, Cyborg has asked a volunteer force of superhumans and heroes to help. As Aquaman issue 16 opens, we find Cyborg laying on an operating table at Star Labs in Detroit. He's ready to do this. But his dad is actually hesitating. They should wait for Sarah. She knows Victor's breathing systems best. Without his lungs, Victor will make a mechanical wheezing sound when the system exhales. Cyborg sees through the concern, but they just don't have time. The League is gone, and Boston is drowning. Just do it, Dad. Silas Stone tells his son that he's going to take him offline, and for the first time, we can see fear in Cyborg's eyes. And then he's turned off. Silas tells his colleague, Dr. Morrow, that they need to start work immediately. Morrow hesitates, suggesting again that he activate his android, but the bickering is cut off. A large screen behind them flashes to life, showing a defragmentation program that Victor set to run while he was out. It's the damaged security feed from the USS Mavis, the ship that attacked Atlantis. He's trying to find out who did all of this. In the Watchtower, Dr. Stephen Shin and Vulko are watching the news coverage of the fight in Boston. From a distance, we see Aquaman grab Batman by the throat, and the news speculates that Aquaman has sided with Atlantis in this war. He might even have been planning this attack all along. Dr. Shin knows better, though. He is sure that Arthur would never betray them. Vulko looks at him. But you betrayed him, didn't you? You wanted credit for discovering proof of Atlantis' existence, and now you'll get it. You look like a frail old man, but looks can be deceiving, can't they? Vulko knows all about Dr. Shin. Arthur told him when he became king. Shin asks who this guy is, and Vulko proudly introduces himself. He is the former advisor to the Atlantean throne, and he is loyal to King Arthur until the very end. You know, in Atlantis, you would have been judged for crimes against the king and killed, Vulko says. But instead, despite everything that you've done, Arthur spares you, because he is a true hero. That's true valor. You have none of that, do you? Vulko had been herding Shin against a desk while he was talking, which he bumps into. He tells Vulko to stay back. Vulko doesn't seem to notice. The League has been taken, he says. The Atlanteans have pulled them into the water. Shin quietly asks, where? Vulko looks at the news. Orm has sentenced them to death. He sentenced them to the Dark Waters. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown episode 26.13 of Aquaman, The Throne of Atlantis, Part 4. Obviously, these opening pages are all setup and catch-up. Author Jeff Johns is getting us up to speed on where things stand, who these characters are, and then he tees up this issue's main story. Aquaman and the League reconciling their differences and escaping the Dark Waters. But we do get some neat character work with Cyborg and his dad for just a moment. I thought for sure that Silas was too eager to continue modifying his son the last time we saw him, happy to have such an intriguing experiment. But he seems legit worried here, like he is actually concerned for his son. He is not just an experiment. That's super unexpected for me, and I think it's actually really sweet. Conversely, we have Cyborg making the decision to lose his lung pretty bravely. He knows that the League is in peril, that Boston is in danger, and that he needs to do something about it. So he volunteers for this surgery that he didn't want, which we saw that he didn't want. But when his dad says that he's turning him off, for just a moment we see that flash of fear in his eyes. That's amazing, because it feels so human, and for a number of different reasons. Because, first off, Cyborg has been connected to the internet ever since he became Cyborg. This means constant input in his mind, easy access to the most classified and hidden documents in the world. I've actually been reading the 2011 Justice League series in my spare time, which runs concurrently with this run of Aquaman, just to see if any of it is relevant to Arthur's story, and not really, but it is really relevant to Victor's story here. Johns has established that Victor knows everything about the Justice League, even the backgrounds of characters like Superman and Batman. If it's on a computer, he says, then I have access to it. Victor might be physically cut off from the world in his armored body and space satellite, but he is also undeniably connected to the world through the internet. And being shut off, losing that connection, has to be terrifying for him. And, of course, there's the added unknown of what he's going to be like after the surgery. In theory, nothing major about him should be different, but you never know. What if something goes wrong? What if he really does miss that lung? Like, you ever think about what it would be like to not have lungs? I don't know what that feels like. This moment of vulnerability for the character is just so human, and it was really unexpected for me. Maybe we see this kind of moment in like a Justice League issue, right? But in Aquaman's ongoing series, this is an issue of Aquaman's ongoing series. I just didn't see that plot point coming. The Dr. Shin and Volko scene is basically all recap, telling us who these men are, how they relate to Arthur, and how they feel about each other. Or at least, how Volko feels about Dr. Shin. Whew. The scene works fine, save for that last topic switch by Volko. He goes from vaguely insulting Dr. Shin, which I understand because of his background, to ranting about how the Justice League is gone and like the level of threat that we've reached. And I just don't see why. That is a terrible switch in topics, like just such a left turn. Jeff Johns has written some weak non-sequiturs in this comic before, but they've generally been like close to what the characters were talking about. This particular switch just feels so forced to get us to the Justice League. Like, I see no reason for Volko to go from berating Dr. Shin to worried about the Justice League. Like, I would think that if anybody's going to make it out of the Dark Waters, it's going to be Aquaman. And you would think Volko would be confident in that, knowing Arthur and his capabilities. So, this is weird for me. It is, however, a solid transition, which Jeff Johns has been pretty good at providing in these past few issues, so let's go check on the League. Down, down, down. In the black waters of the Atlantic Ocean, we find 4 pods resting on the ground. I thought that the pods were made of ice when I first saw them, but we soon learned that they are designed, so I guess not. I don't know what they're made of, but it's some kind of Atlantean thing. Aquaman wakes up and bursts free from his. Batman contacts him through, I don't know, a radio? An earpiece? Maybe he's just talking and Aquaman's enhanced senses can hear him. I don't know, it's not established, we just roll with it. Anyway, he's conscious and trying to break free from his pod. Batman's suit has a built-in oxygen regulator and a pressure system. Aquaman warns him to stay inside the pod, though. They were designed for these pressures, and he assures Batman that his suit is not. Using his telepathic powers, Aquaman summons some fish for bioluminescent light. While he is doing that, Batman attaches subsonic transmitters to his pod. These will allow him to map the area with sonar, giving them a better idea of where they are. The hologram appears in front of Aquaman, projected from his Justice League communicator. Okay, we've got Justice League communicators, got it. They are in the mid-Atlantic trench, where the creatures that he fought came from. There appears to be some kind of temple nearby, probably Atlantean in origin. Batman asks if that's what the pods are for, delivering food to the creatures. Arthur says no, they generally feed people to sharks, actually. It's an ancient form of punishment in Atlantis. Aquaman guesses that Superman and Wonder Woman are farther down, maybe in the temple. A handful of anglerfish appear from the darkness, but then one of the creatures from the trench is on them. In one bite, it snaps the fish in two. Then it rakes Aquaman's side with its claws. In retaliation, Aquaman spears it with his trident, driving it into the beast's chest. As the body floats away, Arthur picks up Batman's pod. He dropped the communicator in the fight, which was how he was seeing the hologram. Batman's gonna have to guide him. They need to find Superman and Wonder Woman and GTFO of here. Batman guides him to a large hole that appears to enter into some kind of chamber. As they're moving, Aquaman says that it was a mistake to try to reason with Orm. But Batman disagrees. The mistake was them turning on each other. They're both at fault for the situation. Arthur then switches topics. What if Orm was the one who triggered the attack, he asks. He doesn't know why he would do that, but an Atlantean acquired the scepter of the dead king. He knows that. We saw that during the Others story arc. That thing can sink islands. He has seen it happen. And Orm wants to sink Boston. Maybe they're connected. If he succeeds, though, millions of people die, Arthur says. So let's hope that someone is handling that situation. And up top, someone is. The backup that Cyborg called in Justice League issue 16 is on the scene, and they're fighting back. We've got Hawkman, Vixen, Black Lightning, Firestorm, Black Canary, and Element Woman all doing whatever they can. But they are clearly disparate forces. There is no leadership, there is no strategy here. Hawkman is vaguely taking charge, just like shouting for the rest of the people to step things up. They need to stop holding back and start killing the bad guys. Refuse to spill blood in a war, he says, and you're going to get yourself killed. And then he gets blown up. And like, he isn't killed, he's superhero blown up, but that Atlantean weapon sure rattled him good. We see a small figure, and I'm talking like a shrunken human figure like Ant-Man or the Atom style, trying to wake him up for a panel. King Orm then walks into the chaos, calm as a sea cucumber. He orders his troops to place the second detonator. Then he surveys the scene. His brother's allies won't stop them. Finally, Atlantis will have retribution for all the lives lost over the years, to war, to poison, to torture. The surface world will know the power of Atlantis, he says. They will fear us as we once feared them. Most of the scene is eaten up by action sequences and little character moments between all the reserve characters. Johns is really introducing the audience to many of these characters for possibly the first time, so they need to feel distinct and interesting from each other. Firestorm reads as someone who is powerful, but a little bit careless. Element Woman is just happy to be there, but she isn't actually shown fighting. Like, she kind of just feels like a happy puppy, like, I'm just happy to be here, guys, kind of deal. Vixen, Black Canary, and Black Lightning feel like the most professional out of the group as superheroes, and they're trying to give direction, find a solution, or at least incapacitate their enemies without killing them. Hawkman, though, is just splitting skulls with his mace. There's a real feral look to his eyes when he is shouting at the others, like, he really feels like a different breed in this fight, and like, I don't know, maybe it's because I grew up reading Wolverine comics, like, I kind of like it. There's a little bit of that Wolverine berserker rage going on here, although it is a little frustrating that nobody calls him in on it like somebody would on Wolverine. If the X-Men were fighting bad guys and Wolverine was tearing people to pieces with his adamantium claws, Cyclops would be like, yo, Wolverine! Take it down a notch, my dude. And Wolverine would tell him to stuff it, but like then Jean would probably say something and he would calm down, and we don't see any of that here. Hawkman is just killing Atlanteans left and right, and nobody's able to stop him. But then once the explosion knocks him out, the threat of these heroes is kind of gone for a moment. For all their power, for all their skill, these guys can't stop Orm, whose plan proceeds apace. His little speech is a reaffirmation of what he is doing here, that the surface world has long threatened Atlantis, and that he is fighting for justice. Johns doesn't want us to look at Orm and see someone who is just a supervillain. He has a noble goal. He wants to avenge his dead. It's just a goal that is bad for Boston and anyone living there. At Star Labs, we see a fully human Victor Stone walking with his girlfriend, Sarah, home after dinner with her parents. The dinner wasn't great, she says, but Victor enjoyed himself, glad to talk football with her father. At least, one of their fathers has an interest in what he does. But then the dream is interrupted. The cyborg suit, sans his human body parts, stands in the middle of the sidewalk and says that it's time to wake up. Victor asks for just a little bit longer, please. And then he's back online. Silas reports that he can breathe in space or underwater now. Nothing will be able to hurt him from here on out. Cyborg sits up and bitterly says, "Yeah." Morrow adds that the reserves have slowed Atlantis, but they have not stopped them. That's about what Cyborg expected, and honestly, that's all that he needed from them. He tells the computer to keep him updated on the file that it's defragmenting, and then he leaves the room. He tells Mara that he has a lock on Batman's location. She nods. Then let's go get him. Folks, holy crap, y'all. I actually completely forgot that Mara was in this story at all. We have had so much stuff going on, and it's just been so meaty and dramatic that I forgot she was even here. Wow, I feel terrible as somebody breaking down comic books. So that scene with Cyborg is like 5 panels, incredibly short, but I love every second of it. Jeff Johns does an excellent job fleshing out who Victor is and what he wants and how he can't have it. And he does it so quickly. Again, 5 panels? God damn. This moment just cuts to the core of the character so well. And penciler Paul Pelletier does an amazing job with the acting. His facial expressions for Victor are great. And I like the cyborg armor appearing as something separate in his mindscape. That's a super cool concept. Oh, and Cyborg has gotten an update to his general look. The doctors didn't just replace his lung, they streamlined his entire body. Previous issues have shown Cyborg to be kind of like chunky and bulky, like he's not quite... So Victor Stone, before the accident that turned him into Cyborg, was originally a football player. And so you think of a football player and you think of a guy who's like got a lot of shoulders and a lot of upper body mass and who's like kind of bulky. And the Cyborg armor really accentuated that kind of silhouette, although with really chunky legs as well. Jim Lee designed Cyborg's redesign for the New 52, and he has got some chunkin' booties on. But here, Cyborg's much more slimmed down, much more human in proportion. And overall, I just really like it. I think it looks great. This look was probably designed by Justice League's new penciler, Ivan Reis. And like I said, I dig it. It is no animated Cyborg from the Teen Titans cartoon, but I do like it better than the old clunker that Jim Lee had him wearing. In the ocean, Aquaman and Batman continue to explore the Atlantean Temple. They find ancient hieroglyphics on the wall, depicting a king wielding a scepter in order to trigger an earthquake. Arthur can feel something else on the wall as well. Batman confirms that it's the creatures that he previously described, the ones from the trench. But this king figure isn't fighting them with the scepter. He's leading them. The rest of the hieroglyphics are broken off, the wall shattered. Aquaman goes around the wall, and he finds their missing teammates. But they're held in a wall of glowing lights and darkness. Arthur guesses that the creature that he killed just brought them here, probably for eating later, like storing them in the pantry. He also guesses that the creature's paralytic spit has affected them. Remember, he was affected by it too when he first encountered these things, and his strength is comparable to Superman's. He pulls up close and then cocks a fist. One punch should be all it takes to free Superman. But then the wall comes to life. The trench creatures surge around Aquaman, fighting to protect their food. But there is too many of them to fight effectively. They're crowding in, isolating each of our heroes. Batman's pod begins to crack under the attack of claws and teeth and pressure. Aquaman shouts for him, fighting to get to his friend before that pod breaks, and then a loud boom fills the chamber. Mera and Cyborg teleport in and get to work, driving the creatures back with sonic blasts and hydrokinesis. They then free their friends, although Aquaman suggests that Cyborg focus on keeping Batman's pod sealed. Both Superman and Wonder Woman are stunned thanks to the pressure and the slime. They'll be okay in time, and they all start moving upward. Cyborg says that he needs to reconnect to the satellite in order to teleport them back out, but they're just so far down in the waters that he can't right now. Superman weakly says that he should have stayed and fought in Boston. So Cyborg updates him on all that stuff happening. Batman isn't happy. They wanted to talk to the whole team first, especially about Hawkman, but Victor says that he had no choice. Mera comments that they need to move quickly, folks, or more of those creatures will appear and, try to eat them. But Arthur says no, he can't sense them anywhere nearby, actually. A chill runs down Mera's spine. If the rest of the creatures aren't down here, then where are they? In Boston, the Atlantean soldiers report to their king that something is coming out of the water behind them. And that it's the rest of the trench. Aquaman guesses that Orm is the one controlling the creatures. The hieroglyphics they found indicate that the King's Scepter allows its wielder to control them. But we see the trench swarm the Atlanteans on the surface, and as Orm begins fighting back, he says that he has never seen these things in his life. The Cyborg adds that if Orm has a scepter that can sink cities, then why is he planting bombs? That seems weird. At Star Labs, Cyborg's defragmentation program finally finishes running. He holds out his arm, showing the footage to Aquaman. Orm isn't the one who got the scepter. He's not the one who launched this attack. Someone else started this war. In the Watchtower, Volko grabs Dr. Shin by his shirt. He blames Shin for all of this. He was the one who got Arthur tangled up with the Black Manta. He's the one who turned the world against him. And when Arthur left Atlantis, he also left Volko behind. Here he backhands the Doctor. Holding up his bloodied hand, the scepter of the dead king materializes. Volko stands over Dr. Shin's unconscious body, the scepter held proudly. Without Arthur around, Atlantis sent him back into exile. They will regret that. If ever, in the history of this podcast, there has been a time for a bomb dramatic reverb, then it is now. Our third party has finally been revealed, and it's mother flooping Volko. The most unassuming man alive has engineered the deaths of hundreds. He has attacked both his homeland and the surface world. He has pitted brother against brother and accidentally pitted Arthur against the Justice League, if only for a moment. That is pretty impressive as far as bad guys go. I don't think I can recall another supervillain who is balding and rocking that 50-year-old man paunch who is still so effective at what he does. That's kind of dope as a bad guy goes. Obviously, we don't really know Volko's motivations or his thought process yet. We'll probably start to explore that next issue or in at least a couple issues' time. But let's take a look at Volko's role in the comic up to this point, because Jeff Johns has been carefully seeding this idea from day one. Or I guess rather from issue 0. I specifically mentioned Volko's behavior in issue 0 as really benefiting no one except him. And not because Volko was outright evil in that moment, but to demonstrate that his main concern in that scene is himself. He didn't volunteer to take Arthur to Atlantis in order to help Arthur. He did it so that he would be restored to his old position, so that he could go home after years of exile on the cursed surface. We've seen Orm's disparaging comments about living on the surface world, and we have no reason to assume that Volko feels any different. So he sees this kid, right, searching for his mom and a home, and he sees the perfect opportunity to not just return home with the new king at his back, but also as a way to restore himself to glory. Arthur would have no reason to trust Orm or his advisors when he got to Atlantis. After all, he was told that Orm most likely had his mother killed. So when young Arthur went to Atlantis, the only person that he would have known to trust, that he would have even thought that he could trust, was Volko. From the outset, Volko is manipulative, maybe power-hungry, and opportunistic. But, and this is a great use of the black hole that is the New 52 continuity, we didn't get to see any of that. We have no idea what it was like for Arthur in Atlantis, or how Volko behaved, or anything. So the only thing that we have to judge Volko based on is their initial meeting. We believe that Volko had the best of intentions for Arthur. After all, Arthur tells us that Volko is the closest thing to family that he still has left. Arthur has trusted him all this time, and so we trusted him too. But then you cut to the next time we see him, in issue 14. Volko is living in Norway again. And I didn't even think about the fact that he was living in Norway again. Last we knew, Volko returned to Atlantis with Arthur, right? That's where he should be. The idea that Arthur abdicating the throne caused Volko to be exiled again wasn't even a thought. I didn't even think about it. I don't even know if Arthur really considered it, to be quite honest. But Johns knows what happened, and he presents us with evidence of the exile. Volko in exile again. And then a dead Atlantean washes up on his beach. Why? Everything that we've been seeing with Orm and Atlantis has been located on the eastern seaboard of America. Volko, on the other hand, lives in Norway. That's almost 3,500 miles of difference and ocean. So what is a dead Atlantean doing in Norway? Well, maybe this dead Atlantean was going to see Volko. Maybe Volko represents a faction of Atlanteans who are loyal to Arthur, who see him as the one true king, and want him to take the throne again. We know that Volko wasn't working alone, because we saw him with other Atlanteans when he got the scepter from Black Manta. And remember, in that scene, the buyer referred to Aquaman as King Arthur. Not Aquaman, not Arthur, not my brother, King Arthur. Whoever that was respected Arthur, which is why they used his old title in that moment. Volko saying that makes so much more sense than Orm does. Orm would have just been like, oh, Arthur, or my brother, or something along those lines. He has never referred to him as King Arthur so far. So, maybe this dead Atlantean was escaping pursuit on his way to Volko to warn him about something, or to update him on their progress or something along those lines. But he got wounded and died. We haven't gotten an explanation for that scene yet at all, so I can speculate about it all day, because it's whatever I want it to be. But right now, all we know is that it sure is suspicious. Johns even threw us off the trail of Volko's attempt in Justice League issue 15, remember? He saved Lois Lane from drowning, and in doing so, put himself in the perfect position to gain the Justice League's trust. Lois Lane even said straight up that as far as she was concerned, this guy was a hero to no less than Wonder Woman and Superman. They had no reason to suspect this guy. So he got to bypass all of the Justice League security and any kind of background check that they do. And he just gets dropped off on their HQ. Hey man, we're going to go do some stuff. Don't burn the place down. He's left alone with one of the two men that Arthur had on his hit list in case of an emergency. Batman and Dr. Stephen Shin. That's some solid storytelling, y'all. Oh. Hopefully, Jeff Johns will connect the dots a little bit more thoroughly over our next couple of issues with kind of like a Sherlock Holmesian monologue of how this all fits together. I certainly don't mind doing it. Like, I love this style of storytelling and seeing the narrative grow and then change as more details are revealed. Like, I'm loving this kind of stuff. But obviously, Johns will have an author's eye view of the story, and I would like to see the train of thought that he used as opposed to just making one up for him and pitching you basically what I think's happening here. Johns has also done a fair amount of work making Orm seem like the one who is the real threat here. There's that old idea in the world of performative magic, right? Where you want the audience to look at your left hand while your right hand does the trick. You don't want to distract the audience, but you want to control what they're looking at, control their focus. Johns has kept us focused on Orm this whole time. For example, Keeping the character swathed in shadows in issue 14 makes him feel dark and mysterious and suspicious. His fish-like helmet looks inhuman and monstrous. His armor is silver and purple, complementing colors to Aquaman's gold and green, which is a pretty classic sign of a comic book bad guy. Even Orm's behavior that we've seen, like him trying to smother that fisherman, was meant to make him look cruel, cold, and murderous. Even the cover to our next issue, Justice League issue 17, features Orm clutching tokens taken from a defeated Justice League. DC was committed to making Orm look like the bad guy for this story, and I really love it. Meanwhile, the physically unintimidating Volko, I don't know, he looks like your kind uncle. You know, he's a little bit fat, he's balding, he's been physically deferential, right, to Arthur, bowing and apologizing and warning people about situations. He doesn't look or present himself like a bad guy, while Orm does. That's
no swearing.
Fucking storytelling teamwork. Ooh, I love it. I also want to point out that author Jeff Johns introduced Volko and Orm in the same issue. Issue 0, and even then, Volko was casting Orm in a bad light. Again, Johns wanted us looking at Orm so that we would miss Volko all this time, and I freaking love that. I also like Cyborg being the one who proves that Volko is the person who set all of this in motion. Johns has clearly been playing with Arthur's relationship to Batman in this entire story, how it has been both contentious between the two of them, and yet how solid it is, how they back each other up. If Batman had been the one to find this evidence and he showed it to Arthur, I don't really know if Arthur would have accepted it easily. I think that he would have tried to deny it at first, no, it can't be, kind of thing. But Cyborg is trusted by everyone in the League, and by sacrificing his last lung, he has also demonstrated his commitment to the cause. Cyborg is almost like an unconcerned third party in this, who really gains nothing from manipulating Batman or Aquaman. So when he shows Arthur the footage, Arthur just accepts it. That's super smart storytelling, and I hereby revoke all of my complaints regarding Batman not investigating who caused all of this. I just wasn't seeing as far as you were, Jeff Johns. Nicely done, I really like that. We also have an old piece of the puzzle that is Aquaman's lore explained. Back in Aquaman issue 11 or 12, when Black Manta discovered the scepter in the dead king's tomb, it was found in a statue surrounded by the creatures. No one noticed that detail back then within the story because they were all fighting for their lives, and then Vostok got killed, and really, we had to stop Black Manta. There were just more pressing matters happening, nobody thought about it, I get it. But now, you and I have a bit of an explanation for that scene, because we now know that the scepter controls the creatures. Maybe the ancient punishment that Arthur describes, of feeding people to sharks, actually evolved out of an even older idea, that of feeding criminals to the trench. Maybe the dead king used the trench to keep political rivals in line, or as a force of last resort, like, oh, you won't submit to my army? Then I'll unleash my monsters on you, kind of thing. That's some cool stuff. Either way, I super appreciate Jeff Johns building on this idea as the book continues to go on. He is slowly revealing more and more of Atlantis' hidden history, like stuff that even the Atlanteans don't know, and it's a really cool through line. It allows us to discover things as Arthur does, so we are surprised with him, and it gives us a reason to keep buying these comics. I could see a part of me being more interested in the background mystery of Atlantis than in Aquaman himself, at least initially coming into this comic, because Johns has clearly won me over with his really well-done character work. But there are comic books that I have bought more for the plot than for the character work before, and I can see that kind of thing happening here. Thankfully, while Jeff Johns' character work from issue to issue might not seem all that impressive, reading all of it in one run really gives you a solid take on the character, so this is a really cool way to reward the reader for continuing to read the book. It's super well done, it's really satisfying. Next time, meat's back on the menu, boys. The Trench swarm the forces of Atlantis, and they have a city to sink. Aquaman and the Justice League have to find a way to save Boston, end the war, and push back the Trench. But doing so will not only break Aquaman's heart, it's going to change his life. Join me in a week for episode 26.14 of Aquaman, The Throne of Atlantis, Part 5. If you enjoyed this episode of Breakdown, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you are not subscribed to the show, then click on that as well. I love getting feedback, and I would really appreciate it if you did so. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to suggest a comic or a series to me, Breakdown can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and on a variety of podcast platforms, with links in the description for this episode below, as well as the email cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Thank you for your time and attention.